I'm Frank, and you're watching the Money Cup channel. Today we're going to explore why market volatility is so high right now. Why has the price of oil reached $76? Of course, you might say it's due to the crisis in the Middle East. But what does a country like Israel have to fight over with a country like Iran, which is 2,000 kilometers away? Why does their conflict cause such significant market shifts? The price of oil, which has risen 20% in the last month, keeps climbing with this much volatility right now. It's the morning of October 7th. Market volatility is over 21%, and on Friday, we closed near all-time highs across almost all indices. When we close near all-time highs, we usually expect normal volatility around 13 or 14%. So what does this heightened volatility signal? A market crash? More record highs? We need to take a quick look at history. This video might not be in my best interest because I'll probably upset both anti-Semites and pro-Semites, those who support Israel and those who don't, and those who support or oppose the Muslim world and so on. But today, we're going to dive into some history. We're going to take a neutral, completely unbiased look at the Israeli-Iranian conflict. You should know that I have no special sympathy for the Jewish people, nor am I an anti-Semite. I don't side with the Muslim world either, just as I have no particular affinity for Trump or Kamala Harris. If we want to understand how the world will evolve after the US elections or how it will be influenced by the Israeli-Iranian conflict, we need to understand the past and what's happening now. Maybe that will give us a clue about what will happen in the future. In 1948, the State of Israel was created. I'm not going to give you the whole history lesson, just a few details to explain the current situation. When the State of Israel was created in 1948, it was through a decision of the United Nations. Let's see who voted for it, who voted against it, and so on. The creation of the State of Israel was through a United Nations decision approved without any vetoes from the 5 permanent members. You should know that the Soviet Union, at that time, voted for the creation of Israel, mainly because communism was supported by Jews. There were about 1.3 million Palestinians in what is today Palestine and 600,000 Jews. Even though there had already been significant Jewish migration, especially after World War II and the Holocaust, many Jews came with the hope of having their own country, which seemed fair. When the land was divided, it was split 55% for Israel and 45% for the Palestinians, even though Palestinians outnumbered Jews by 2 to 1. This infuriated the Arabs and the allies of the Palestinian state. The very next day, after Israel was created by the United Nations, they attacked. This marked the start of the First Israeli-Palestinian War, or Israeli-Arab, or Israel-Muslim War. Iranians aren't Arabs, they're Shiites, Persians, but they're part of the Muslim world. The conflict today isn't between Israel and Palestine, it's between Israel and the Muslim world, or more precisely, a part of the Muslim world. It's important to know that the first Muslim country to recognize Israel was Turkey. Right after Turkey, surprisingly, Iran recognized the State of Israel in 1950. No other Arab state recognized Israel, except for Turkey and Iran. The dynamics were different back then. Israel was supported by the Americans, but so was Iran under Shah Mohammad Pahlavi. Iran was an open society for a long time, much like Turkey under Ataturk, who secularized the country, and Iran under the Shah followed a similar path. Things were looking up until the Shah, a dictator and a bloody one at that, began persecuting his own people. Most historical problems stem from persecuting another race or even your own people. Stalin persecuted his political enemies and threw his own people into camps. Hitler targeted Jews and others, and so on. Every dictatorship finds a scapegoat. At one point, a democratically elected Prime Minister, Mossadegh, took power in Iran and decided to nationalize the country's resources, specifically oil. The British, who owned the Anglo-Iranian Oil Company, called on the Americans for help. The U.S. got involved, and the CIA managed to overthrow Mossadegh and bring the Shah back, who had just fled the country. The Shah ruled Iran until 1979. A year before the Islamic fundamentalist revolution led by Ayatollah Khomeini, the U.S. was still very close with Iran. President Jimmy Carter even attended military parades alongside the Shah and never once protested against human rights abuses. The Shah's secret police were ruthless, committing crimes and arresting many people, not all of whom were Muslims or fundamentalists. During this time, France, which was hosting Khomeini in exile, remained somewhat neutral. Charles de Gaulle had long opposed Israeli dominance in the Middle East. De Gaulle had serious issues with the Israelis and even refused to deliver frigates they had purchased after the 1967 war. Many of you might know that Mossad managed to steal those frigates from a French port, which was considered a brilliant Mossad operation. The First War in 1948 allowed Israel to expand beyond the 55% of Palestinian land initially allocated by the United Nations, gaining control of about 65%. Around the same time, in 1949, Benjamin Netanyahu, the current Prime Minister of Israel, was born. After the Six-Day War, Israel tripled its size because in that 1967 war, Israel struck first. It attacked Nasser, took over the Sinai Peninsula, and occupied East Jerusalem, which had been divided between Jordan and Israel, as well as the Golan Heights, and so on. Things got even more complicated in 1972. During this period, many important events happened, but perhaps the most significant was the Munich Olympics. A Palestinian group called Black September took 11 Israeli athletes hostage. Germany, trying to reconcile its dark history with Hitler's concentration camps, hosted the 1972 Olympics in the Federal Republic of Germany and invited Israel to participate for the first time. Things were going smoothly until the attack disrupted everything for the Germans, Israelis, and the entire world. Germany organized a commando group to rescue the hostages, but the operation ended in disaster. All the hostages and most of the terrorists were killed. Hours earlier, it was announced on TV that all the hostages were alive and Israeli families were relieved. But by morning they found out that their loved ones had been killed in the botched German operation. From that point on, Israel and Mossad developed a department focused on targeted assassinations. It's clear that many intelligence agencies carry out such operations, but Mossad openly admits to having a department dedicated to eliminating enemies. This is where the whole story begins. You should know that Golda Meir, Israel's prime minister at the time, gave Mossad full authorization to hunt down and eliminate all the organizers of Black September, responsible for the Munich attack. They formed a special commando team led by Mossad Chief Harari, carrying out assassinations in various countries. They first struck in Paris, then Cyprus, Athens, and Rome, eliminating key figures in the Black September movement in retaliation. The Israeli people demanded revenge, especially after the Holocaust. But neither their Bible nor ours, nor any religion, condones revenge. Mossad made mistakes at times. In one instance, they misidentified Ali Hassan Salameh, a leader of Black September, in Norway. They assassinated him only to discover that he was a Moroccan waiter, not the real Salameh. The waiter was killed in front of his pregnant wife, who was 8 months along. Israeli agents involved in the murder were arrested by Norwegian police, marking one of Mossad's biggest failures, despite its reputation as the best intelligence agency in the world. During this period, they also killed a Palestinian writer in Rome. 25 years later, it was revealed that he had no connection to Black September or the Munich attack. When you take up the sword, you risk the other side drawing theirs. The Palestinians responded with a wave of attacks, including the hijacking of an Air France plane to Entebbe, Uganda. This time, an Israeli commando team successfully rescued all the hostages with only one casualty, Yoni Netanyahu, brother of current Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. You see how history connects everything? Yoni's death prompted Benjamin, who had been studying at MIT in the U.S., to return to Israel. Fueled by the loss of his brother, Benjamin eventually became Prime Minister of Israel multiple times and leads the conservative Likud party. But what does Iran have to do with this? Iran is a Shiite Muslim country, while most Arabs are Sunni Muslims. The heart of Shiism is in Iran, the former Persia. There are also Shiites in southern Yemen and southern Lebanon, but they are a minority compared to Sunnis, who dominate North Africa and most other Muslim countries. Shiites have always been in conflict, and it's important to know that Iran doesn't get along well with Sunni-led Saudi Arabia. Iran didn't get along with Gaddafi, who also wanted to lead the Sunni world. Nor did Iran get along with Nasser, because during his reign, the Shah of Iran was in power, and they were declared enemies. Iran, which had recognized Israel in 1950, eventually became a supporter of the Palestinian cause. The Palestinians include both Sunnis and Shiites, though they are predominantly Sunni. The Sunni group Hamas emerged to fight Israel, while the Shiite Hezbollah was formed later. Hezbollah grew into a political party in Lebanon and held power for many years, leading Lebanon into destruction through numerous civil wars. Israel, in response to every move by Hamas, Iran, or Hezbollah, uses force. The other side, lacking Israel's financial and military power, resorts to bombings, terrorism, plane hijackings, and attacks like 9/11 in New York. In this situation, where the 9/11 attacks were carried out by Saudi nationals, while Saudi Arabia remains close friends with the United States, it's hard to make sense of things. Why can't there be peace? Various peace agreements have been attempted, but haven't lasted. There's something else you need to know. Many of Israel's prime ministers were at some point involved with Mossad or the military, participating in operations that involved eliminating people. Benjamin Netanyahu seeks revenge for his brother's death in the Mossad operation at Entebbe. Menachem Begin, another Israeli prime minister, organized the bombing of the King David Hotel in Jerusalem, killing British military leaders who occupied Palestine at the time. We can't say terrorism is only on one side. We can't say that when the Israeli army attacks, it's not terrorism, but when Hezbollah does, it is. How can this conflict be resolved? It seems there's no way out as long as Israel continues to have strong backing from the United States, and the U.S. also has support from parts of the Sunni world, like Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and the Emirates. No American president has yet tried to decisively impose peace in Israel. As long as the question of the Palestinian people remains unresolved, Israel's strategy of colonizing more land won't make Palestinians forget their homeland and leave. The idea that Jordan, with its 60% Palestinian population, should absorb all Palestinians, allowing Israel to retain all of today's Israel, including Gaza and the West Bank, won't happen. For every Palestinian who dies, 6 more are born. Palestinians are increasing in number, and anti-Israel sentiment grows in other Arab countries. There are many Arab leaders, like Nasser, or now Iran's supreme leader, who gain fame by promoting war against Israel. This huge problem needs to be addressed by the major powers. In the past, it was the Soviet Union and the United States. For a long time, the USSR supported Nasser and the Arab states, although initially it supported Israel and voted for its creation. The Soviet Union backed the Islamic Revolution to a certain point, but then became worried about uprisings in its own Muslim regions. The intervention in Afghanistan was primarily driven by the desire to prevent a fundamentalist state from forming on its border. It wasn't aggression against America or the West. But they failed. And it seems that Islamic fundamentalism will continue for a long time. Wrapping up this brief history lesson, It's a shame I don't have 2 hours to tell you in detail how Netanyahu became prime minister, how the Oslo peace accords were signed, how Begin signed a peace treaty with Arafat, and how Yitzhak Rabin, the only Israeli prime minister who made peace and recognized the Palestinian state, was assassinated just 2 months after signing the agreement. No one, it seems, really wants peace, on either side in Israel. Don't think that if Israel occupied all the territory tomorrow, conflicts with surrounding nations would stop. Israel is a small country, and as it continues to bring in Jews, its population grows, with a booming economy and one of the world's top 3 militaries, ready to take on anyone. Now that we've covered some history, what can we say about the current situation and how it will affect the global economy moving forward? After all, this is an economic news channel, and we're trying to understand how political and historical events impact world markets. Today is October 7th, 2024, and just yesterday, Iran announced it was suspending all-night flights. This signals that a new missile attack is likely coming. Netanyahu will respond with an attack on southern Lebanon, aiming to destroy Hezbollah's stronghold, as Hezbollah's Shiites are based there. Israel has already eliminated many Hamas and Hezbollah leaders. It has even managed to carry out assassinations in Tehran using incredibly sophisticated methods like pager bombs, which caused numerous collateral casualties. Any country on whose soil such an assassination occurs should protest these collateral deaths. However, just as France, England, and Cyprus didn't protest when Mossad eliminated Palestinians on their soil, they won't protest now either. On the other hand, there was a protest when Putin eliminated Litvinenko in London by poisoning him. This double standard in how such actions are treated doesn't help bring about the peace we all want. For the rest of us, who aren't directly involved in this conflict, we are affected nonetheless, as oil prices rise to $76. An oil price jump from $60 to $76 in just a month means inflation is coming back. If oil stays at $76 or $80, inflation will return. There's no way Chairman Powell will cut interest rates twice, not even by 0.25%. This will lead to a correction in the markets. What can Iran do? When they launched 180 missiles, none of them caused significant damage in Israel. Maybe a building was hit with no deaths or injuries on the Israeli side. Israel and the U.S. claimed a huge success, saying they intercepted and destroyed all the missiles. Israel's military dominance leaves Iran with almost no chance of success. My concern is that at some point, Iran will actually manage to develop that atomic bomb, and they won't ask anyone for permission to use it. Iranian fundamentalists defend their religion with fanaticism. It's no surprise that even Putin opposes religious fanaticism. All these elements will eventually converge, creating a major conflict that the rest of the world will inevitably get involved in. As you know, Putin helped Bashar al-Assad in Syria fighting ISIS. Trump got involved too, but not in the right way. ISIS started planting bombs in Paris and who knows where else. This whole terrorism mess will only escalate. If you can't strike Israel, you'll target countries that are friends with Israel. Slowly but surely, countries will be affected just because they are allied with Israel. At this point, we can't say there is a Palestinian state. There isn't even a Palestinian Authority left except in the West Bank. Two groups, or rather two terrorist organizations, attack Israel. Hamas, representing Palestinian Sunnis, and Hezbollah, representing Palestinian Shiites. And Israel is fighting them both. Oil-exporting countries have realized that they need buyers for their oil, so they've sidelined the Israeli issue. Iran has a problem because when it signed the not-so-smart deals with Obama, it had at least calmed down for a while. But then Trump pulled out of the agreements, and Iran resumed developing its nuclear capabilities, building reactors. Benjamin Netanyahu proved that Iran is still thinking about making an atomic bomb. Just as Putin, in desperation, threatened with nuclear weapons, it wouldn't be surprising if Iran made similar threats. Iran might even take action more easily than Putin, who has some advisors that would warn him that nuclear war means the end of humanity the next day. This can only happen if some lunatic on either side decides to press the red button. I believe that no matter who wins the White House, they will continue to support Benjamin Netanyahu. Despite his corruption charges and other issues, Netanyahu has managed to form a government with Israeli Orthodox parties and will continue to attack Palestine. Like Putin, when facing a crisis, instead of resigning after last year's Hamas attacks, Netanyahu will respond with force, stirring populism, nationalism, and a desire for revenge among the Jewish population, many of whom would prefer peace tomorrow. If you conduct a poll in Israel today, you'll find that the most beloved prime minister remains Yitzhak Rabin, whom they killed themselves because he signed a peace deal. Maybe it could have been a lasting peace, but it disappeared with him. All the right-wing Likud leaders, whether Begin, Sharon, or others, were at some point involved in the crimes of the Six-Day War, the Yom Kippur War, various attacks, or revenge missions, and they have grudges and scores to settle. It's very difficult for the Israeli and Palestinian people to reach an agreement. The only country that can impose a solution is the United States. But the U.S. no longer has the kind of clear, diplomatic, and intelligent leadership capable of balancing Israeli power and occasionally siding with the Palestinians. Things could spiral out of control quickly. I believe this conflict will escalate significantly in the coming months, and next year we will see oil prices continue to rise, inflation returning, and an economic crisis taking off. Right now, there's no economic crisis on the horizon. America is experiencing growth. Europe has begun recovering, bringing inflation down, and so on. In Western countries, only France stands in strong opposition to both Putin's Russia and Israel. France has serious problems if you look at the markets. French government bonds have higher interest rates than Spanish bonds. The new French government under Barnier and its budget is so precarious that France could soon end up like Greece or Italy, facing issues with its sovereign debt. All of this will be resolved through populism, and populism, whether in Europe, America, Israel, or Iran, leads to nothing good. I'm not happy that Austria's nationalists won. I'm not happy that Italy's right-wing nationalist party is in power. I'm not happy that Le Pen's movement is gaining more votes in France. A people that supports populism and nationalism isn't an inherently bad people. Do you think the Germans were criminals in 1933 when they brought Hitler to power, knowing what would follow? No, and neither would the Russians have made the Bolshevik Revolution if they knew what would come next. The problem is different. In times of desperation, people will do anything, even vote for those who promise revenge. They'll support anyone who promises to restore dignity. Whenever multiple nations humiliate a country, as in Germany's case, you get Hitler. The same happened with the Russians. Things eventually turn against you. The same can be said for the Iran-Iraq conflict. After the U.S. was upset about the Shah being overthrown, they supported the Iraqis. They gave weapons to Saddam, who waged a 10-year war with Iran. Then, using American weapons, Saddam attacked Kuwait and fought the U.S. See how the Americans sold weapons that were later used to kill Americans in the Gulf War? The same thing happened in Afghanistan, where the U.S. supported fundamentalists against the Soviet Union during the 1979 war. Those same fundamentalists would later fight the U.S. in 2003. When you don't think long-term and lack leaders with a vision, humanity doesn't end up in a good place. Right now we're living comfortably, far better than we deserve, on borrowed time. We don't realize that until we resolve these issues, like the conflict in Ukraine or the Middle East, we won't be able to truly progress. All the artificial intelligence in the world won't solve the problem of this wave of nationalism and populism. So stay tuned, share, like, and subscribe, and we'll keep you updated on what's happening in the markets and how the Iranian-Israeli conflict is affecting the global economy. Understand that this channel is moderate and neutral, where we try to analyze a political situation that has existed for over 70 years in the Middle East.